We are now talking to BetSperts fantasy football and handicap analyst, John Daigle. What's going on, Johnny?
Bet Sports or Bet Spurts, as you mentioned earlier, whichever one you prefer.
Either way,
it is draft week. We are all excited. And so that's what I've been working on for a few months now. So I'm excited to be here and talking with you yet again.
Yes, and I'm happy to have you on the show. You're one of the great football analysts we've had on the show many, many times. You're very popular all over Twitter and social media, especially some of your takes and some of your different things that you post up on your Twitter. How are you doing right now? I mean, with BetSperts and fantasy football and being that there's football, the draft is right around the corner, my friend.
In life, I am doing quite well.
Yes.
Settled in Chicago since the last time we talked. Met somebody, for better or worse, because ideally you don't want to meet someone in the North when you're not from the North. And yet here we are. Winter is certainly coming, and now I'm stuck in Chicago for the foreseeable future.
Is she from New York?
Other than that, though,
is she from New York?
She is from Chicago.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
The North.
No, I'm just saying, because if she's from New York, in Jeff's category, get rid of her. She's bad. They're all bad. All New Yorkers. Horrible.
At least in Boston and New York, there's a camaraderie in the winter. Like, you all know you're miserable. In Chicago, everyone's just outright miserable. It's just cold. It just sucks. Windy by the lake. It's just miserable. So we get through that, though. It is now getting closer to spring for all of us. And then in terms of work-wise, the past couple of months been working hard on the draft. I think we have a couple good leans and bets to discuss tonight, so looking forward to diving into it.
So why don't we get into the draft? And there's so many things going on right now when it comes to this draft, especially who's going to be the number one pick. We've been hearing week after week Hutchinson. Now we're hearing Walker. Where do you see this first pick going from the Jaguars winning it, and where do they go at the number one pick?
I'm of the belief, everything we've heard, that Trayvon Walker would be Trent Baalke's decision, the GM they kept in place, so much so that, remember, they chose him over bringing in Byron Leftwich, who made it an alternative. If you were hired, they also had to fire Baalke at the time. They said no, retain Baalke. Doug Peterson, an offensive-minded head coach, in on Ike Ekwonu, the left tackle, right tackle, wherever they choose to play him at. And then anyone else that doesn't make decisions on Aidan Hutchinson. And that's why I think we've seen Aidan Hutchinson's number fall very short and basically become second or third odds wherever you look. I still think Baalke and Walker are the choice here, unless Shad Khan overrules him all of a sudden. But otherwise, Walker is still my favorite pick for number one overall. And then actually, I think Ekwonu would be the second favorite. And then Hutchinson, because again, the people pulling the strings in the organization that like Hutchinson, they don't matter. They're not the ones that make the decisions. So put that in the back of your mind. It's Walker, or to a lesser extent, Ekwonu, in my opinion.
So we've also heard different rumors from the other two teams in the top three about these surprise picks, too. We've heard the Texans have been interested in Kyle Hamilton, which a lot of people have in the top three. And also Sauce Gardner is getting some steam also in that mix, too. GM comes from the Patriots. They love defensive backs, especially. And Detroit, too. We've heard them say they might possibly take Trayvon Walker over Aidan Hutchinson. So what do you think about those rumors?
From everything I've read, I think I am personally down to two decisions at number two. And this is assuming Hutchinson is passed on at one. There's also a belief that Kayvon Thibodeau is either their first selection or the backup option. And we have proof of that because I just did a show, Move the Line podcast, shameless plug, wherever you listen to podcast at, iTunes, Spotify. And we had an individual there who basically works with a syndicate, Joey Knish. And he's very good at intel and getting information. And what he confirmed to us was 2 weeks ago, there was actually a Vegas syndicate, a smart betting group that scooped up all of the Kayvon Thibodeau to number two odds whenever they reached their low point. So people are on it. Now, whether they are on it because of intel, because of something they heard, or because it was the best number at the time, that I don't know. I still like to have my money on Hutchinson, though, and I'm fine losing if the Lions have the balls to pass on the hometown kid who matches Dan Campbell's philosophy to the T, both in his effort in the run game, his strength. He actually led all edge players in bench reps. He didn't do it at the combine, but at Michigan's pro day, he benched 28 reps, which is one more than Thibodeau did. And so I'm going to lose my money and go down swinging with the guy I don't think they can pass on at all as long as the Jags passing them at one. So I still have Hutchinson over Thibodeau over two. To your other point, though, PD, I actually think Derek Stingley is number three. We know for a fact one team inside the top 10, if not two, have Stingley on their board over Gardner as the top cornerback. And from everything we hear, I think the Texans are the one team that are leaning that way. So much so that in his press conference, when Lovie Smith was asked about his cornerbacks room in particular, he literally said, we need to improve there. Didn't protect him at all. Just said, these guys suck and we need to do better. And since Stingley has now been medically cleared from last year's injury, remember, before that injury, he was the first pick as the number one corner over Gardner anyhow. So now that we've sort of come full circle, I believe that's where Stingley goes. So he is my betting option for both the number 3 pick, wherever everyone's listening out there. If you can look at a book near you, I do like him as number 3 overall and in a trifecta, 1, 2, 3 to pick off with Walker, Hutchinson, and Stingley.
Wow. We are talking to BetSports Fantasy Football and Handicap analyst John Daigle. John, the New York Jets are at 4. A lot of people have been talking about the past week. The Jets are very interested in Ekwonu. He's a big offensive lineman. Joe Douglas likes those offensive linemen. I don't think they need them. And then everybody thought if Kayvon Thibodeau was sitting there, he would be the guy that they would be drafting. But now there's a lot of stories coming out from the Jets that Jermaine Johnson is the guy that the Jets would probably lean towards at 4 if they're looking for a pass rusher.
Let me walk you through the hamster wheel and why I think all roads lead back to Ike Ekwonu for the Jets. And that is, we knew Thibodeau was their second option behind Ekwonu this entire time, right? And so the recent news was that Jermaine Johnson is now prioritized over Thibodeau. But no one said anything about Ike Ekwonu falling behind Jermaine Johnson. And so no matter what happens, and it makes sense both rumors-wise, as we just noted, and X's and O's-wise, because George Fant played above his career basically last year at left tackle, was excellent in place of Mekhi Becton. And honestly, on an expiring deal at the age of 30, they can now let him play it out this year and prove himself for a long-term deal if they take Ekwonu, moving Ekwonu to right tackle immediately, or if he outplays his market, let's say, and they don't want to pay that, they also then have a left tackle for the future in Ekwonu as well, since that's where he played in college. It makes so much sense that they continue, like last year, prioritizing both their offense for Zach Wilson and for themselves, knowing that whatever we think about Zach Wilson in the development, they have a rookie contract for the next 4 years for cheap. And they need to make this as easy as possible for themselves. And so no matter which way I look at it, even if they do like Jermaine Johnson, even if they do like Thibodeau, all roads lead back to Ike. And that's the way I'm handling it. Ike is my favorite player to be the number 4 pick, no matter how the top 3 shake out. Unless, of course, I should say Hutchinson is there, but I don't think any way in hell that happens.
So are there any teams that you've heard that maybe could be a surprise team to trade up into one of the early picks, maybe like the top 5 or something like that? Is there any teams that would surprise everybody, maybe trade multiple 3 first-round picks and do that?
If the Texans were blowing the Stingley smokescreen in everyone and instead go Evan Neal, even though we have had some news in the past 48 hours that Neal's medical for his knees came back as red flags, and now teams at least in the top 5 are very concerned. If they are one of those teams, though, that aren't concerned and then shock us all by going Evan Neal at number 3 overall, I bet they try to take that number 13 pick and trade back up with the Panthers at 6 to jump ahead of the line for Stingley. That's how much I know they love Stingley. I also think the Saints are open for business with their 2 first-round picks to move up to either the Giants at 5 or 7 or the Panthers at 6, because Saints' priority number 1 is replacing Teron Armstead at left tackle, and there's a massive drop-off between Charles Cross and NFL GM's minds and the next 2, which would be Trevor Penning and to a lesser extent Tyler Smith at tackle. And so I think the Saints have Charles Cross in their targets, and that's what they're going to do. So those 2 teams I would be interested in, as well as if a player falls the Jets really like at 10, I don't think they mind shipping that 10th pick as well to move up a couple spots. But we'll see how that shake out. Right now, I think it would only be the Saints or Texans.
John, you look at the Jets at number 10. There's a lot of wide receivers that have been in the realm of where the Jets are going to be looking at. They've been talking about Williams. They've talked about Drake London. They've talked about all these different guys. Now, if they don't make a move for Deebo Samuels, which it doesn't seem like it's going to happen, because we've heard what John Lynch said the other day. There's no way in hell he's trading Deebo Samuels, but I don't believe that until it happens. Who's the first wide receiver off the board, and where do the Jets go if they stay at number 10?
The first wide receiver off the board got really interesting once the Giants put into the ether that they're willing to trade Kadarius Toney. And so that makes them an intriguing spot to draft whoever is highest on their board. Maybe it's Jameson Williams, maybe not. At number 7 overall. Overall, I think we should really be on watch at number 8 with the Falcons. And that comes down to whether Drake London or Garrett Wilson is higher on their board. If you asked me 2 weeks ago, I would have said Garrett Wilson. Now, in the past 48 hours, I'm of the belief it's Drake London. And if that's the case, it gets to the Jets. And then it comes down to who's higher on their board between Garrett Wilson and Jameson Williams. Again, 2 weeks ago, I would have said Jameson Williams. You asked me in the last 24 hours, I'm pretty sure they're very high on Garrett Wilson. And then you go to 11, and we know the Commanders' options are down to Drake London or Kyle Hamilton. So if Drake London's not there, they likely pull Kyle Hamilton off the board, since we were expecting him to fall past every team except maybe the Falcons at number 8 overall. And from there, all bets are off, honestly. I know the Saints have Chris Olave as either the number 2 or number 3 wide receiver on their board, and I expect him to be there at number 16 for them. The Eagles are very interested in Trey Burks and at least one receiver with one of their 2 picks, although they are hoping Kyle Hamilton falls as well. And from there, it just gets a little finicky in the back because it's question marks, right? It could be Patriots, Cardinals, Packers, I expect to take one. Chiefs, I expect to take one. Cowboys, if Treylon Burks goes to the back, given that Jerry Jones also went to Arkansas, and that's why they build a shitty football team every year, because they make decisions like that. So I fully expect 6 to 8 wide receivers to come off the board. The fact that we got medical red flags recently on George Pickens basically pushed him not only out of the first round, but the second round as well. And so now we can kind of push up Jahan Dotson from Penn State for sure inside the first round, and then maybe Christian Watson on the back end. Other than that, it's a big question mark after 20, honestly.
So you mentioned Deebo Samuel. The rumors coming out that he wants out. Then John Lynch says, no, we're going to pay him. We're going to make him happy. Do you see him getting traded before the draft?
He said, hold on one second. He said there's not a chance in hell they're trading him. That's what he said. In those words.
So what kind of money do you think he'll end up making? Do you think he'll get the contract he wants then in that case from John Lynch?
From people I trust, I have heard he wants $25 million per year, and he's looking for a 3 to 4 year deal. Also, though, remember the Jets, when they try to trade for A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf reportedly, Tyreek Hill for sure, they try to trade 2 second-rounders. They weren't willing to part with that number 10 pick. And so I wonder if it's true they would be willing to part with that number 10 pick, knowing they would also have to give Deebo a massive extension the moment they trade for him. When, in fact, if they take a receiver at number 10 overall, they don't have to worry about that extension, right? Especially the way the market works for receivers and guaranteed money now. They can now avoid that chaos for the next at least 3 years. And so that's intelligent business. So I honestly think, and this refutes a few smart reporters, I don't think that's the case at all. I think they just take a receiver at number 10 overall, knowing that's how they can get value right now.